to Ephesians 6, starting with verse 1. And this is probably the verse that most parents will look at and say, yes. Yes. It says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and your mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you go back to the Ten Commandments, this is the first commandment that actually has a promise, because it says that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. God had told the Israelite children, obey your parents, because if you do, things will go good for you. And all the parents are saying, well, amen. Yeah, life would be a lot easier if our kids just obeyed everything we told them, wouldn't it? I know mine would. Even on vacation, while we're relaxed and, the stresses of life aren't there, there are still times I had to say, stop. Enough. I've told you twice. I'm not telling you a third time, which I just did. Don't you love how we say that? I've told you twice. If I have to tell you again, you just told them again. But children are to obey their parents. And this word for children has nothing to do with age. So that means I'm 54 years old. What am I supposed to do to my parents? Obey them. Even though I think sometimes that I don't know whether they're going to listen to this or not. They're crazy and they don't know what they're talking about. I know that they have wisdom that I don't. And I need to obey them. I need to honor them. But I think in this context that Paul is talking about, because of, and again, we got to look at context, we got to look at the whole verse, the whole chapter. He's not just talking to all children. He's specifically talking to young children. These would be unmarried children who are still living at home. He's saying you need to obey your parents. With this idea in mind, we got to remember that the command from Exodus 20:12 is to honor our mother and father is for life. It's not just when we're a child. It's not just when we're living at home. We are to honor them for our whole lives. But as we get older and the needs of our parents change, the practice of honoring our parents change. I don't honor my parents the same way I do when I was 6. Now, yeah, I could go out. Well, let me say this. If I go outside and I go and pick my mother's flowers and bring them into her today, she's going to look at me and think, what are you doing? Thank you for the flowers, but you just picked my flowers. But when I'm 6 and I do it, she's going to say, oh, isn't that precious, right? And I honored her at 6. I'm not so sure at 54, picking her flowers that she doesn't want picked and giving them to her is going to honor her. Things change, right? They change a little bit. But Paul instructs children to obey your parents. This requires that our children fully comply with the instructions they receive from their parents. Maybe sometimes we have to tell them 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. My kids, I don't understand how they can't. Their minds just don't absorb because they're all over the place. Squirrelitis. Squirrel! And they go, we're driving. This is funny. I have learned to not react to my son when he's in the car. Because if he sees an animal outside the car, he screams. Ah! And I'm like, ah! We're driving. We're in Ohio. Yesterday, we're in Ohio. And he's like, hey! There's wild turkeys out there. He saw like 4 or 5 wild turkeys. And I've learned not to respond, like by driving off the road or going in the other lane because I'm thinking, oh, what's coming at me? They get distracted. So we got to talk to them. And Paul's going to talk to us about how we need to react to them sometimes. But they must obey us. Now, I want to be honest with you. It's easier to obey instructions that, first of all, are sensible. I've got to. This is something I struggle with. I look at my children and I think in my 54-year-old mind how it should be, right? But what I don't do is think how it is in the mind of an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old, right? It's hard to think like them, but that's something we need to do. What we tell our children to do must be sensible. Unless, I put a caveat in here, unless it's life-threatening. It may make no sense, but if it's life-threatening, they just got to do it. It doesn't need to make sense. But in our normal everyday interactions, it needs to be sensible, and they need to be explained clearly. I have learned that many times I explain things to my children, they don't understand a word I'm saying because I'm speaking in adult, and I'm not speaking in kid. Sometimes we have to speak in kid, right? It needs to be sensible and explained clearly. Also, I think it also is important that the kids know that I love them. And I wouldn't tell them to do something if I didn't love them, you know? And they're more willing to follow me and do what I ask them to do if they know that I love them. So I got to show them my love and tell them that I love them. And they must know that I have their best interest at heart. You know, when we're kids, we don't always understand that our parents make decisions for us, and we think that they're just being mean, right? Oh, they're just being mean. They don't understand. And then there comes that point in time where we say, you know, I think mom and dad did know best. You know, the TV show Father Knows Best. We just think, yeah, I don't think so. And then we reach that age, we're like, oh, I guess he did know best. I think especially when we have kids, we start to realize, wow, mom and dad did know what they were doing, because now I have kids, and I'm running into the same problem. And I'm doing the same things they did that I hated. Right? But that's the best thing to do. And they did it because they love us and they want to have our best interest at heart. But we must also understand that children are naturally sinful. Oh, not my angel. Oh, yes, your angel. Because we're naturally sinful, right? Aren't we? We're naturally sinful. And as their parents, we will need tons of disciplined love. You cannot discipline without love, but not indulgence. Why? I just let Johnny do what he wants because, you know, I don't want to hurt his. I don't want to, you know, tamper down on his personality. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes I let my kids do some things that I'm like, oh my gosh, I just can't watch this. But they need to do it because that's who they are. Caleb was supposed to play drums with me this morning. Was he up here? I could have gone down there and gotten him. But he's down there with his friends he hasn't seen in 2 weeks. I'm going to leave him alone. I'm going to go ahead and let him do that. Now, I'll tell him, did you forget to do something? And he'll go, oh. That's okay. That's all it needs. We need to know. We need to know that when we got to teach our children, but we can't bully our children. We can't just tell them to do things just because I'm bigger at you. And, you know, it's like what Bill Cosby says, you know, I brought you into this world and I'll take you out. That's what he told his kids. We can't do that. We got to do it with love. We got to do it with discipline, but with love. It's a very sobering commentary in our Western society that many parents complain that they cannot discipline their unruly children. Yes, you can. You can discipline. And I'm not talking, we're going to talk about this in a second, but I'm not talking about smacking your children. I'm not talking about physical discipline. I'm talking about who's in control here. As Paul is writing about the pagan depravity in the world, in Romans he gives a list of the attribute of those with a debased mind. And this is what he wrote in Romans 1, 29 through 30. He's talking about these are the people who are debased in their minds. He says they will be filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil. And then he puts in there, disobedient of parents. These are people who have a debased mind. These are people who just don't get it and are evil. They're all these things, and they disobey their parents. And I would argue that the disobeying of the parents is the foundation for all these other things.